Coaches, welcome to this edition of the Basic B-Ball podcast. Super excited to have our guest on today, Coach Mike Burgomaster from Auburn University. Coach, how you doing?
Not too bad. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Doing well, man. Really appreciate you coming on.
Sir.
As we get going here, I was just hoping you could kind of give a quick, brief background of your history and how you've gotten to Auburn and kind of some of your stops before you've gotten there, and then also how you've even progressed at Auburn itself, too.
Sure. So I got my start working in college basketball actually as a student manager at the University of Miami. I was there from 2012 to 2016. Was really fortunate to be a part of some great teams there. A couple of Sweet 16 teams under Coach Larinaga. The team my first year actually ended up winning the regular season and tournament ACC championship. And so realized that, this is what I wanted to do. I originally had gone to school thinking that I was going to, take my finance degree that I got and go back up to the Northeast. I'm from Massachusetts originally, so go back up to the Northeast and, work in finance up there. But realized that, I wanted to keep pursuing coaching, for a full-time career. And so ended up at Auburn right after that, was fortunate to have some mentors that were able to connect me to Auburn and Coach Pearl. And so arrived at Auburn in the 2016-17 season as a graduate assistant. Did that for a year and a half before, I finished my master's at Auburn and was able to then, get promoted to being a full-time. My first position was assistant director of ops. And then I've had like a couple other titles. I've been like assistant to the head coach. I've been recruiting coordinator, just kind of, different titles. And then going into last season, when they changed the rules where, the staff could be extended and more people could be on the court, I was promoted to being our assistant coach and offensive coordinator. And this will be my 9th year at Auburn. So only the 2 stops, not an illustrious background, but I've worked for 2 amazing head coaches that I've learned a ton from and, try to amplify what they've had success doing on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I think it's pretty cool. Yeah. The 2 head coaches you've worked for, both pretty legendary in their own rights of just the runs they've been on and just definitely the reputations they have. Speaking on just that Auburn of being there for as long as you have and being able to progress through all those positions, how's that looked for you and kind of what can you speak to yourself of being able to be in such a high level program as long as you've been and being able to just progress? A lot of young coaches bounce around from job to job, kind of trying to level up, and obviously being SEC is huge and being a part of that program, but how's that look for you being able to go from each one of those positions and be able to kind of level your way up?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, first and foremost, I wouldn't be in the position that I'm in today if it weren't for the people that I've worked for. I mean, I got a very nice review from Coach Larinaga and a nice recommendation to even come and be here and be a graduate assistant. And then, Coach Pearl is amazing as far as not just a basketball coach, but just as a leader and a manager, if you would say of an office, right? He treats his staff really well and gives you a lot of opportunity to show him what you can do. And so one of the things that I was fortunate to kind of read from him early on is, the more valuable I can make myself on his staff, the more opportunity that I'm going to get, even if it's areas that I hadn't had experience in before. And he kind of in my growth in these 8 years has allowed me to try things and to fail and knowing that, him knowing me and knowing, the work ethic that I've shown from the second I stepped on campus has allowed me to kind of grow and try all of these different facets of our program, whether it's been, operation stuff or it's been scouting stuff or, now having a more increased role with the offense and, or it's, being on the floor and player development stuff and using my voice in practice and coaching, he's just an unbelievable boss. And I think, a piece of advice that I try to give to younger coaches is like one of the first things you need to do is not worried about how do I get to the next spot, but you have to learn your boss, right? Because you need to be able to effectively do what they're doing or what they're expecting of you. And you need to be able to effectively like learn their communication style to make sure that you're doing the things that are expected of you. Right. And so, that's one of the things I just somehow grasped onto early on. And so, because of that and because of the way that, of Coach Pearl's leadership style, been able to progress and be the role that I'm in right now.
No, it's super cool. I think that's a great advice is, learn who you're working for right now. I think, as you mentioned, so many guys are trying to progress in whatever it is, and not only be really good where you're at, but make sure you're serving who you're under really well too, and make sure you know what they are kind of want. Just like you said, you get that kind of good review from your coach and who you're working for.
100%.
You kind of were mentioning about being able to jump into different spots. What that kind of look like for you? Because I know being a GA and that's kind of, you're doing a lot of grunt work and stuff like that. And then as you progress up, you kind of, I guess, have more opportunities and probably feel more comfortable jumping into like scouting, things like that. But what are some examples of stuff, especially as you were kind of younger in your Auburn years, of what did that look like for you? Some different things you were jumping into.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the ways that Coach Pearl has always done, like I'll use scouting as an example. Like one of the ways he's always done his scouting is he breaks his staff up into 3 groups, generally led by the 3, top assistants. And so, those groups are going to split up each scout, all the scouts by a third, right? So, you're doing 1 every 3 games essentially. And so actually my second year as a graduate assistant, it happened to be at the same time that we were going through some of the that time in college basketball when there was like the FBI stuff going on, that sort of stuff. And so our staff unfortunately got down to a place where we had two assists, our head coach, 2 assistants, 1 interim assistant, and then 2 graduate assistants, which, for an SEC staff, if you look at some of the size of the staff is now, that's not even close to what all these people have. And so it was kind of baptism by fire in a way, right? And so scouting, for example, in order to split up all that work that we normally do as a graduate assistant, I just had to take a much larger role and learn on the fly and rely on some of the stuff I had learned in my first year, working under some of the assistants that we had. And so we ended up winning the SEC that year and being a 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. And so the fact that I was able to kind of step into that role and had been a sponge prior, because we talk about, and this is where I might jump around here for a second, but we always talk about with our players, right? You've got to be ready for your opportunity, right? If you're not playing as many minutes as you want, if you're not starting and all of a sudden someone goes down and you're thrust into this role, if you're not ready, who knows if that opportunity is going to come again, right? And so I tried to kind of embody that same concept from a coaching perspective and happened to be in a position where I was ready and ready to take on more responsibility and just tried to be a sponge from the year prior and we had success. And so I think that earned me a lot of trust with Coach Pearl. And so it's whether it's been recruiting or now they just changed the rule where the additional staff members can now go on the road. We can't all be out there at the same time, but I've had the opportunity to go on the road now twice, in my career and just constantly just trying to do more to grow and to add more value to the program.
That's awesome. I think it's cool. Yeah. You get those kind of adverse situations that, if you're really able to take advantage of, and like you said, be ready. We always ask our players that. And then sometimes as coaches, we're so stubborn of like, no, this is my role, so I'm just going to do this. So I think that's great advice of kind of be able to be open to new and different things to really help you guys win. And obviously that's kind of what it led to.
Right.
Just kind of want to talk on, so your new role, as you kind of mentioned, is as offensive coordinator along with assistant coach. Just kind of curious what that entails for you. Like, what is your day-to-day and what are you kind of during game day as well? And how much of the offense are you helping with and how much are you contributing towards that? And kind of what things are you contributing towards that?
Sure. So, I mean, just I'll start with day-to-day just because I'll lead into sort of like what the game situation looks like. But from a day-to-day standpoint, from when my title changed from, I think the last title I had was recruiting coordinator / assistant to the head coach. And then I became assistant coach, offense coordinator. The roles and responsibility haven't changed a ton, right? I was doing a lot of still operational work. I was doing a lot of, prepping our staff for evaluation period, prepping, for visits, that sort of stuff. Being a liaison on campus with multiple different departments, whether it's compliance, marketing, all this sort of operational stuff that helps make the program run. I'm still doing a lot of that stuff. Where I've been able to increase my day-to-day is being on the floor with players, right? So whether it's, having a bigger hand in the player development piece, where in a non-coaching role before, I couldn't be on the floor with players. And so there's an increased, amount of time to that each day. And then, the other thing is practice prep and the actual practice, right? So before, as a non-coaching staff member, you're only in a practice setting allowed to coach the coaches. Well, now I'm in situations where when some of our other staff is on the road, I'm thrust into drills. I'm coaching on, or even at times when, I'm running practice. Right. And so there's that whole addition to the responsibilities that I've loved. I mean, this is what I've wanted to do the entire time I've been in this, in this industry. So the fact that there's just extra work and it's work that I love on top of it is awesome. When it comes to like a game in season, the responsibilities, I've always been involved in the scouting since, that year. But now, it's definitely an increased role in scouting, and now that I've been labeled our offensive coordinator, I'm involved in, every scout as far as helping our staff and helping Coach Pearl prep what, the looks that we like offensively or the concepts that we like offensively. And then in game, my role is to take what we've prepped as a staff and feed it to Coach Pearl throughout the game to help him make play calls. But also, while I still love both ends of basketball, and it can be hard for me sometimes, like, sometimes when we're on the defensive end, I'm supposed to be thinking about, okay, what comes next? What comes after that? And kind of be, help prepping for what comes next in the flow of the game. What adjustments we need to make and maybe whatever, adjustments the opposing defense has made that we need to, make changes for at halftime with some looks that maybe we hadn't planned for, but hey, they're doing this and we thought they'd do this, so let's add this into our list of things that we like. And then, also throughout the season, it's then monitoring that, right? Like, okay, what are our efficiencies for these given looks? Is this, entry into an action, is this, not as efficient as this entry, right? And keeping track of all of that stuff broken down to, it's minimalistic forms, just so that we can make the best decisions, throughout the course of the game.
Oh, that's awesome. So one of the things you kind of had mentioned on in there was really being able to like have a voice in the scouts and talking about how you're going to exploit or take advantage of whoever you're playing, whatever that looks like. What does that kind of look like for you? And what are some of the things you guys are looking at as far as taking advantage of matchups, either individually or taking advantage of different systems they're playing defensively as well?
Yeah. I mean, we look a ton at, first and foremost, I always tell people that we're a very scout specific program, and maybe a package of stuff that we run offensively in one game. You may not see us run that for another 3 games. Right. But we try to have a bunch of stuff in our repertoire to be able to exploit however somebody's going to guard. Cause there's a weakness to every single type of defense. There's no perfect defense. Now there's some people that are really good at, knowing their weaknesses and not letting you exploit them as much. But, so we try to keep track of that sort of stuff first and foremost, as far as like what certain looks do against certain defenses and how it'll exploit how they guard. I'd also say, when it comes to like a personnel, that's kind of like, having a self scout and knowing our personnel. And then, in the scouting process, like working with the coaching staff of like, hey, I've seen this, kept track of this person. He, his defensive efficiency is not up to standard, or we have a real advantage there. And then it's, kind of with a little bit of feel throughout the course of a game, knowing when to go to those matchups, given the certain looks that we have. And then, it's my job to know, like, all right, this is the situation I want to create based on how they're guarding. What do we have that gets us in that situation? Right. And it's kind of that, and that's what I'm thinking about throughout the course of a game.
Awesome. So you kind of had also talked about, your guys' offensive efficiency. You guys have been top 20 the past couple seasons, or throughout the few last seasons, both like on KenPom ratings, both on points per possession, just a bunch of different metrics, super highly rated on offensive efficiency. What's some of that stuff that both in practice, and then you already mentioned it, of even just that scouting that contributes to your guys' efficiency? Is that kind of personnel based, or is that really speak to your guys' system and what you're doing?
Yeah. I mean, I think as simple as it sounds, you're going to be good at what you work on. Right. And so, I think well, Coach Pearl wouldn't necessarily like come out here and start talking about the 4 factors of, but honestly, the 4 factors have a lot to do. He probably wouldn't even know what I was talking about if you said the 4 factors, but that's the stuff that he just works on intuitively, right? So, we're constantly working on free throws. We're constantly working on, really simple drills to not turn the ball over. Turnovers are going to happen. Teams are going to force turnovers, but the amount of unforced turnovers that you can limit, that's stuff you can drill. Offensively, conceptually, we constantly plan for offensive rebounding, right? So that's why, our offensive rebounding rate is going to be constantly, where it needs to be. And then, while we give a lot of freedom, I think we do a great job of even through the summer and the fall and going into the season, I think we do a great job of teaching our guys while we give freedom, what are good shots and what are great shots. Right. And sometimes, sometimes you got to take what the defense gives you, but there's certain things we're trying to get to. And so I think, these are the stuff we focus on. I think these are some of the components that we focus on. And that's part of the reason why you see our offensive efficiency numbers going up, because we work on that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one thing I think is super interesting about you guys is I think you do have such a good balance. You get a lot of points in transition. You guys run a pretty free offense. You guys also have a bunch of great stats. And like one thing I think that's cool, whenever I watch kind of some of your guys' stats and stuff you guys do, you run a lot of flex stuff, cross screens, recross screen, like UCLA stuff. Can you just speak on that of some of your offensive sets and what kind of inspires some of that stuff? Is that stuff Paul's kind of had forever and he just uses guys? Is that something kind of new? But it's super efficient when you guys run it too. And it's a little bit old school and not like the sexiest stuff, but it's still super efficient.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the stuff that you have spoken to, I mean, a lot of that comes from Coach Pearl's start in this business. And, he worked for Dr. Tom Davis at Boston College, Stanford, and Iowa. And he always talks about, I'm still running the same flex stuff that, that Dr. Tom had always run. And, it's hard to guard, right? Like, screen the screener action is hard, and if you add no third defender, like that's essentially what flex is, right? And so it makes it really hard to guard. You put a guy in a decision where he's got to make a choice, and if you execute and drill it as much as we do, like you can get really easy good looks. And then I think part of it too is we like to constantly learn, right? So you could look at, we're going to have staples in our playbook every single year, but you could look from, the team that went to the Final Four to last year and the meat and potatoes are probably all the same, but there's lots of tweaks and counters and concepts that we try to do a really good job of fitting to our personnel. And so like, we're a very scout specific program, whether it's a self scout or an opponent scout. And we just kind of try to blend that all together based on some of the simple concepts we work on to, put out the best offensive product we can.
Nice. I just kind of want to go back to speak on kind of your history. So you had mentioned obviously under Coach Pearl right now, and then Coach Larinaga in your first few years. Is there anything you could share that those guys have shared with you, or any kind of pieces of nuggets or information that they've given out to you? Just like I said, being 2 super successful coaches, 2 super big names in the game, just anything that they've kind of shared with you or kind of you've learned with being around those guys?
Yeah. I mean, I think the one common theme, and while they do it in different ways, is I think both coaches, they really value trying to breed confidence in their players, rather than beating them down and saying that's a bad shot, or, subbing somebody out after they make a mistake. And like I said, they're both way different personalities, but like, Coach Larinaga, I feel like always used to feel like, the players are going to play better if they feel better. Right. And Coach Pearl, while he's very fiery, it's not always about like how he's saying things, it's what he's saying, right? And so he comes off as this like he's going at these guys all the time, but he's just communicating throughout the course of the game. And I think he does a really good job of, like, he's never going to really say that's a bad shot. He's going to get on the guys that didn't go offensive rebound it hard enough, right? And so I think he's able to get, and both of them are really able to get a level of special out of their players that, may not have been highly touted guys, coming out of high school, or the no-brainers that were going to be, top 5 in the NBA draft. And I think both those coaches have done that really well, and that's why they've both had a ton of success in their career.
Yeah. One of those things you mentioned is Coach Pearl, like, not really wanting to say that's a bad shot. And that's interesting because you guys talk so much about shot selection, and you guys talk about that a decent amount. What does that look like in your program of talking about shot selection? Because as we kind of were talking about how efficient you guys are, that has to be and somewhere in what you guys are talking about. But what do those kind of conversations look like? Is that a lot of video? Is that a lot of voice-to-voice conversation? But just curious what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we keep track of statistics all the way from the first time we have an organized team workout back in the spring, right? All the way leading up. And I think, we just, without saying like, hey, you shouldn't take this shot, you know what I'm saying? I think we do a good job of positively reinforcing the great shots, and talking about statistics, open and honest. Like, look, if your statistics are here from the 3-point, like at the end of the day, you guys make the decisions on who shoots and who doesn't, right? Like, everybody knows that you're a 28% 3-point shooter and you just took the first 4 in this scrimmage, right? Like, at some point your teammates are going to hold you accountable for that, and you're going to learn that that's not helping us win. Now, granted, there's going to be some circumstances where that, it's a great shot, and there's circumstances where coaches actually, I've seen coach get on guys more for not shooting, than shooting, but it's just kind of a process of where we try to positively reinforce the great shots and continuously point those out. And even throughout the year, we're still going to take some shots where people are like, huh? But, that happens every once in a while, and that's part of giving the guys confidence. But hopefully they, don't go out of control with that, I guess, essentially, is kind of the grand hope of it all.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's so important for guys to be able to play loose. Yeah, if they got that kind of on their back of worrying, is Coach Pearl going to rip me a new one for whatever that shot or whatever, especially with him, as fire as he is. Like, that's the last thing I want is getting yelled at by him for taking a bad shot or whatever. So definitely keeping those guys free.
Right.
Coach, last thing I got for you is a 30-second timeout. So just going to put you through a little end-of-game situation and put you in the hot seat and see what you got drawn up for it. Ready for that?
Let's do it.
Awesome. Okay, so your situation here, 7 seconds left in the game. You're down 3 with the sideline out of bounds. So what do you got drawn up for that?
Yeah. So, all right. So let's just say that we're talking about the left side of the floor. You're going to have your best shooter take the ball out on the left side of the floor. You're going to have your point guard, ball side, block, and you're going to be in sort of a box formation. So point guard, ball side, block. You'll have your 5-man at that sort of top of the key, the slot area, working his way down to he's going to set a zipper screen for the point guard. And then on the other side, you're going to have assuming your second best shooter is going to be your other wing. He's going to start all the way in that opposite corner. And then your 4-man is going to start in the, opposite slot of the 5-man. So it's a little bit of a box with the guy standing a little bit out to the outside. But essentially what's going to happen is your 5-man is going to then zipper for your point guard. And when that ball goes in, and because you have 7 seconds, I'm a huge proponent and fan of getting to hammer action. I just think it's a hard action to guard, based on the principles that everybody teaches their defense about, rotation, trapping the box, all that sort of stuff. And so what I'm actually going to zipper my point guard, and then he's going to get into a hard right-handed speed dribble to the outside, almost at the 4-man. Not quite getting too close to him where they might think it's a ball screen, but almost a little bit veered out. While that's happening, the 4 is actually then also going to zipper for the 3-man that started in the opposite corner. And so when one comes off that speed dribble and he's trying to turn the corner and get to the hammer, your 5-man who had set the initial zipper for your point guard is going to set a hammer screen for your best shooter. Let's say your 2-man that inbounded it. And that's going to be your first look, but also then what's going to happen, because your 3-man had zippered off of your 4-man, your 4 then is actually going to turn around and set what we call it a pin-in screen, but basically come back and screen for your 3-man to give you a second option if that hammer action's taken away, and also trying to take advantage of the fact that, when teams rotate to trap the box, they also sink and fill. And so you give yourself 2 options, with 7 seconds left to try to get a 3-point shot off.
No, I love it. And I love what you said about the hammer screens, man. It is such a tough action to guard. I think any kind of flare, hammer, stuff like that is so against any defensive principle that I feel like we don't run it enough in basketball. You don't see it enough with the flares and hammers and stuff like that, just because it is so tough to guard.
It's always in special situations, but it's a tough action to guard. And yeah, it's because, everything you teach from defense for the most part in day one is, all right, like, low to the ball, rotate to help. And it's, you got to have, you're really trying to take advantage of the defense's situational awareness. And are they disciplined enough to stay in these shooters' passing lanes? Is the guard that's guarding the inbounder, right? Like, is he jumping towards the ball, right? And then he's going to get more lined up for that screen. So it'll be, I think you'd get a decent look off of it. That's one of my favorites.
Absolutely. And hoping that guy knocks it down. That's the big one.
No doubt.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you, Coach, taking some time and getting on here and dropping a little bit of knowledge. Just again, thanks, man. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you having me. I enjoyed doing it.
Thanks, Coach.